Okay, welcome to episode 2 of AI TV. My name's Nick Bradshaw, I'm the host, and we're broadcasting live from here in Cape Town. It's a great honor to introduce Dr. Jacques Ludik, who's joining us, and today we're going to be talking about ethics and all the topics around ethics and privacy in AI. And I think interesting week. I think we've seen Facebook with a record fine, I think $5 billion about data breaches and things like that. Jacques, I think anyone who's in the AI scene right now knows that ethics and privacy and what people are doing with data is a really important thing. What's your view on that?
Yeah, Nick, I thank you. First of all, it's great to be here in Cape Town with you.
Thanks.
So I think from a Cortex Logic or Cortex Group perspective, we take it very seriously. We want to help transform Africa. We want to help businesses and society thrive in the smart technology era. And in order to do that, trustworthy AI ethics are critical. It's very, very important. And I actually participated in a few panel discussions recently where we're actually discussing this topic. So it's a very serious topic for us. As a matter of fact, last week I was in Kenya, in Nairobi, and we actually had some of the leaders in ethics talking about these kind of things. And as a matter of fact, I think Singapore was first with their ethics principles, and they actually came out with this, they call it FEAT. FEAT stands for fairness, ethics, accountability, and transparency. And it was all about promoting FEAT in the financial services sector. So they take it serious. And when you actually study that, you see some great foundational framework that one can utilize, especially if you think about financial services sector and what's at risk there. And just to unpack that, so if you think about fairness, things like just decision making, is it justified? Can you justify it? Is it accurate? Is there bias? Those type of things. Then obviously ethics, are you ascribing to the ethics of your company? Do you have a board that's looking at ethics as well? From an accountability perspective, there's internal and external accountability. And they talk about data subjects, and that's the people that's providing the data, and that's the users. Is there a way for them to actually get information about the decisions being made? How's my data being utilized? So in Singapore, they're taken very seriously. And maybe my final comment there is that was kind of a foundation also for the European Union, because they obviously earlier this year came out with ethics guidelines about trustworthy AI. We can maybe talk about that. And I think they also had an interesting perspective, because they actually talked about foundational layer, what's the key requirements. They more thought about how to operationalize AI. If you operationalize AI, what does it mean from a trustworthy or ethics perspective? And there's a lot of things to delve into that as well. But anyway, yeah, so exciting topic, Nick. It's people around the world are talking about it.
Now you were an early pioneer, yes, Jacques, in the 90s. I think certainly here in
2000s. Yeah,
right. Okay.
90s.
I was going to give you a bit more credit there. But when you set up the company C-Sense, I mean that was very much looking, or it was before AI was a buzzword and trendy. Very much focused on like hardcore early machine learning, and it was, and you were looking at systems which I guess mining systems or things which kind of, there was some data involved with it, but it wasn't necessarily people's personal data. Now we've moved into the sort of mobile era, social era. Now there's huge amounts of data slopping around. Now AI in that context, in the context that you used it, maybe was more benign, but now we're living in this social age. So what would you be recommending that a CIO right now in an enterprise is thinking about deploying this? They've got a lot of data, a data lake. I mean, what sort of advice would you be giving them?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question. There's so many things here. When you just talk about the history, I just want to quickly mention you do get customer-facing applications versus industrial applications, and obviously, I think for customer-facing type of application, we work with customer data. Then things like privacy of data, and we're going to talk more about that because I think that's a key building block, privacy and data governance. But if you think about I think fairness and explicability, can you explain your decisions and stuff, is very important. And we did quite a bit of that Well, it was not really. It was like the Wild West still at that time. But the industrial world, there's other things from a trustworthy perspective that's important, like safety and robustness. And that's also important for consumer-facing AI kind of solutions. But to answer your question, in terms of my advice, you got to start with the building blocks. So I think you talked about Facebook and privacy. We know that is a building block that you got to solve. You got to make sure that you address that in a proper, responsible way. In all our customer engagements with enterprises, they ask about privacy, data governance. If you've got data in the cloud or in a private cloud or on-prem, how do you deal with that in a responsible way? So we've got documentation, we've got actually policies around those type of things, and we make it available to our customers. And as a matter of fact, also our customers in industrial. It's not only our in financial services sector or retail sector. But my advice would be absolutely to get that right. You don't want to mess around with privacy and data governance. And the moment you move above that, then I think you move into the machine learning data science space, and then it's transparency and accountability and fairness and those type of things that you want to get into and make sure you get that right. Because if you've got systems that's making predictions and making decisions and judgments and stuff, you want to make sure that you can explain it, or you can at least verify and validate that the system is still doing what it's supposed to do. So there's a lot of things that comes into play. Yeah.
And what about things like, obviously, once you start building a system that clearly AI only works with data. Without data, you don't have AI. But without good data and representative data, you can get bad AI. I think is really what this scenario we want to avoid.
Yes.
So again, sampling data, training an algorithm with representative data is key. It's interesting, when I was at the AI for Good Summit, there was also a group of people working on what was known as a quality mark. I guess maybe that was similar to FEAT, but are there any other examples you've seen or come across where maybe regionally there's different approaches to this, that if you have a system, it's got a quality mark, so therefore it's accurate, or have you read around that at all?
Yeah, so I think it's still the Wild West. There's so many people coming up with solutions, and there's the AI for Good. There's all these initiatives. The Future of Life Institute, they talk about also various things. But I think when you talk about quality, you talk about, this is very key. If you want anyway models that can generalize well, that's what you want. So you want to make sure it's representative and there's models that can generalize well. In the industrial world, one thing that was super important for us, we talked about TVQ, time, stamp, value, and quality. So with every tag, for every variable, every feature that went into a system, you always check the quality. And if you think about what happened with Boeing in terms of 737 MAX and a faulty sensor, and data quality went bad. So in all the systems that we've implemented in the minerals, metals, mining, and the manufacturing space, to implement robust systems, the quality is an absolutely key factor. And you want to make sure in real time that you check the quality. If the quality deteriorates, then you want to address it. So I feel there was quite a bit of work done about quality in the industrial space because of the robustness and safety of systems. It's obviously pretty important for consumer-facing businesses, working with structured and unstructured data. How do you check the quality of unstructured data, texts, all sorts of things? Maybe with sensors, there's drift in the sensor, or there's ways of detecting things. You maybe have rules, it goes out of bounds or whatever. But I think with unstructured, with text type of data, with just conversations and stuff, it's a difficult thing to check. In terms of, I think there's still a lot to be done in terms of quality in general. There's a lot of my big problem there is also, about fake news and fake everything.
Yeah.
So how do you know? As a matter of fact, you get these generative, we get these GAN systems, that's adversarial neural network systems, that's trying to fool the system. You've got a system that's generating stuff, and the other system that's policing, and trying to say, is this thing fake or not? So these kind of systems are going to get better and better and better. So it's going to fool us easily.
Yeah.
So in terms of quality and stuff, we're entering an interesting world.
Now, I think another observation is that you've got a kind of east versus west split with AI. In the East, maybe I'm referring here to the places like Japan or South Korea or
China,
where tech and gadgets are kind of bread and butter for everyone. Everyone's happy talking to a bot or some kind of assistant. Obviously, here in the West, we're very much more, I think, pessimistic about it. People are saying, is my phone listening to me? How do I switch it off? Or
like paranoid.
Well, exactly. So we've got the kind of Western world are in the Terminator death bot scenario, and then in the East, you have people seeing these assistants and AI as a force for good, or it can help me. So do you think East versus West is also playing a factor in this, that exploitation in the East is happening faster because people are much more accepting of it, and they're thinking, well, okay, I don't mind if they're listening to me because I get lots of extra value. Whereas on our side, we're kind of like, oh, I don't want anyone listening to me, so I want to switch this off. How does that play with the ethical debate, do you think?
That is an intriguing question. We're probably going to have a whole session just on that. And I think if you think about Japan, it's almost like there's an easy adoption of just humanoids or robots and stuff like that. And I think you recently put something out on Expo on do we want our robots to look like this?
Yeah, it was a BBC article. They did the reporter had written about, in the East, they're quite happy to have a device that helps them that doesn't look like a human, so like it's an egg or something like that, whereas we tend to be obsessing around stuff that look like humans. And I think, to me, when you try and do that, it looks more inhuman than human.
I agree.
And yet, if you look at some of the Japanese or Chinese or Southern Korean type devices, they look more cuddly. They're just like a kind of egg or something like that, and you kind of want to talk to it. So I think the end user experience in the West, we're more pessimistic, we're more scared, and a lot of that is to do with ethics and privacy.
Definitely, I think it's a cultural thing as well. So there's no question about it. I feel there's also, if you think about data privacy, how data is being handled in the East, and so that as well, that comes into play as well. It's different to Europe, where there's a really serious focus on privacy. I want my data protected and stuff. And I see kind of the Chinese government is also having a look at those type of things as well. So there's many different things. So it's definitely clearly in the way data is being handled, and I think it's maybe a fine balance, because in China, for instance, with WeChat and the effectiveness of that type of platform being kind of a universal platform that allows you to do so many things and make your life easier, they may be more acceptable to let it go. And so this is all the benefits that I'm getting. This is really cool. And we don't see exactly those type of systems yet, those kind of super platforms in the West. It's more kind of, you've got your Facebook and Google and various systems, not everything in one. But I think the robot thing that you mentioned, the humanoid, those, especially in China, in Japan and South Korea, there's clearly a different way of looking at it. And I think as Homo sapiens, we need to get together and we need collective wisdom in terms from an ethical perspective, because there's lessons to learn from the West and well, it's kind of, for me, interesting. Maybe we should say the Americas, Europe, and the East, because I feel it's like in Europe they're almost kind of leading ethics and privacy and those type of things, whereas in America it's slightly different. So there's some leadership, different types of leadership in this space. But I think we need to work together. We're still a human race that's getting closer and closer and more connected. So I think it's in our best interest if we are this collective wisdom treating these type of things. We've got a lot to learn from the East. We've got So
it's very interesting. I mean, halfway between the East and the West is Africa. I mean, we're on a very interesting continent right now. There's a lot of very interesting things going on here. And I mean, just to wrap up, I mean, I think we've got a lot of young engineers, young entrepreneurs now emerging out of all sorts of fantastic initiatives across the continent. We have data science, Nigeria. We've got activity in North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa now. And what advice would you give from a sort of ethical and privacy perspective to a young engineer who's thinking of developing an algorithm and just starting out on their journey?
Yeah, I think what we need to take it seriously. Even if we're trying to leapfrog here, we're building African solutions for African problems. We still work with data. We still work with people's data. We're delivering solutions to to people. We have to take responsibility, and I think there's a lot to learn from what's happening in Europe and the East and West and so forth. But we can use the best of that and implement it in our solutions. I'm quite excited about the entrepreneurs here. There's an eagerness and willingness to create solutions, be very pragmatic and practical in terms of our solutions. So, but yeah, my advice is just go for it. Learn as much as possible from what's happening elsewhere and implement and be practical and pragmatic. Just start using it, implementing solutions.
That's great. Well, Jacques, thanks very much. It's been great to chat to you. It's always fascinating to talk to you. Also, thank you very much for allowing us to host AI TV in the offices of the Cortex Group today. In episode 3, we're going to be joined by Selena Lee, who's the CEO of Zindi, which is an African data science challenge platform. And we look forward to interviewing her next week. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.